whether poor, medium class, rich, everybody must be given the same opportunities. And sometimes when we talk about equity, what it means to me is sometimes giving more to the person who have less to bring them up to the same level as the person who would have much, Mr. Speaker. Undoubtedly, Mr. Speaker, we need to look at our education system and re-evaluate what is happening. Because I can ask the question, especially at the secondary level, for every one, I'm speaking about nationwide, for every 100 students who enter a secondary school, how many of them graduate at the end of 5 or 6 years? I know sometimes we also talk about second chances, and we must be able to do that. The honorable member for the Northern Grenadines, the leader of the opposition, spoke about the problems that existed at his alma mater, where 27 had entered the school at that year, and at the graduation 5 after, only 9 had graduated. What happened to the others? So I'm asking the question, do we have the figure? For every 100 students who enter school at the secondary level, how many of them were able to graduate at the end of 5 or 6 years, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I heard the Minister of Education in his debate was speaking about, if we could remember the time when it was hard to gain places at the secondary school, and people had to go to the ministry and they were crying and all sorts of things. But Mr. Speaker, from a magazine that was published by the University of the West Indies, it was the 9th issue of this magazine of June 2011, and it states that St. Vincent and the Grenadines were one of the highest movers in creating access to secondary school education from the early 80s to the year 2000. It stated then, in the early 80s, it was 37%. But by the year 2000, St. Vincent and the Grenadines had made such a dramatic increase in access to secondary school education that by 2000, it was at 83%, Mr. Speaker. And this information was documented by the University of the West Indies in a magazine called The Pelican. This is just to state. No, I don't have the date. It is the 9th issue, and it is the January to June issue of 2011, which they give, 2011, sorry. That is where that information came from, the University of the West Indies, and it is our premier institution in the region. So I would expect that they would have done all the research and have all the documentation. So it proves, Mr. Speaker, that we were making considerable strides. So and when I say the year, I'm not playing politics with it, but it's the early 80s to the year 2000. So it proves that the New Democratic Party would have done a remarkable job. And football and education is not something we must play football with. As I said before, no one has a monopoly on knowledge, no one has a monopoly on solutions, and we all need to work together to come up with the best fit for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to say to the Minister of Education, I agree that reading should be taught separately in schools, because I sat here last year and I heard comment about reading should be done, they're doing it after school, and some children don't want to stay. And I think doing it at that time would create a stigma, even to some of the children who have to stay, because some of the comments that would be made. Mr. Speaker, being a teacher, for years, I taught at both levels, the secondary and the primary level. For years, there were students at the common entrance level who came to a class, my class, Mr. Speaker, and some couldn't read. But as a teacher, you have to learn how to divide your class and help those who cannot read in order that at the end of the period, they will be successful. And Mr. Speaker, some of those children who we said was at the risk level were able to do so well and pass that exams. It only proves that if we do what we are supposed to do, that we can reap success in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in literacy and numeracy. Mr. Speaker, the OECS Statistical Digest has stated, without all the figures in this house already, that St. Vincent and the Grenadines, among the OECS countries, had the highest dropout rate. And they were questioning as to why. And also we had the highest repetition rate among our students, even at the secondary level. The dropout rate was higher at the Form 3 level. And it sort of taper off when you go to Form 1, Form 5. Not that you didn't have dropouts. In some cases, even at Form 5, even though the dropouts number was smaller, you had it. You know why? Because some students, their parents could not afford to pay for the CXC subjects. So, as a result of that, they drop out of school. But, Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House, we in the New Democratic Party are saying that that will be no longer a problem for our young people, because we will pay both CXC and CAPE subjects once you qualify to do that. We feel that is a good investment in our students so that they will be able to make good of the opportunities that are given to them. So, Mr. Speaker, it involves re-engineering of the education system to cater to the needs of all of our people. What are some of the things you may ask we can do? One, Mr. Speaker, we can create a more equitable system, one in which all schools will be considered to be prestige or elite. Because, Mr. Speaker, in this country, sometimes depends on where the school is located. You do not attract and get some of the best minds, even though they come from those locations. And we must change our methods of access to secondary schools by make sure that all schools, as much as possible in every locality, be considered to be elite or prestige. Mr. Speaker, I will go on. For example, I will deal with Myro. We are talking about equity. When we look at the students from Myro, Mr. Speaker, they have to pay a boat fee. From paying a boat fee, they also, when they reach Union Island, have to pay a transportation fee, plus other fees for lunch and all of other factors which may occur, because they are not getting home until after 4 in the evening when the boat leaves Union Island. I have spoken to some young people, Mr. Speaker. At 1 year, I count about 12 who drop out of school, secondary school. When I questioned them, some said, Mr. Ollivierre, my parents cannot afford to pay the boat fee. And I must reiterate, they had boat fee and they also have van fee. And Mr. Speaker, how is that equitable when you compare it to the mainland? Here you have children who are struggling. Their parents live on an island where you only have seasonal work during the tourist season. And they find it hard. Some argue and say, yes, they get help from certain organizations, international organizations. There are yacht companies that visit Myro. They saw the plight of these young people, and they try to help by giving fees, which goes directly to the school. The fees are then used to pay the operator of the boat, But my point is, Mr. Speaker, sometimes it is not enough. We need the government to get involved in order to help pay either the boat fee or the van fee to make it much easier for the students to access secondary education. Next point, Mr. Speaker. Because, you know, we can sit here and we can say government involved and that, but I am telling you what have been said to me. Okay? But, Mr. Speaker, on one instance, I even had to approach the leader of the opposition to get funds to pay for a student to stay in school. Because when they don't have the money to pay the boat, what happens to them? And there are students who have dropped out of school because of this particular reason. And if we are talking about equity, we must make sure that we cater to the needs of all of our people as much as possible. Also, Mr. Speaker, Canouan. We spoke about the secondary school at Canouan. Since 2001, when I became a member of this House, that was a burning issue. And I'm glad to say that as of September 2019, that problem was solved. Mr. Speaker, it was a glorious day for the people of Canouan. Don't tell me you solved it, because after the CPEA examination, the students were sent to various schools all over St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It was then the parents started to protest. Some even said, we are not going to sit to mainland St. Vincent. If my child have to stay home because I cannot afford it, let them stay home. And Mr. Speaker, because of all the protests, also of kids joining a picket line and saying they cannot take any more. Because, Mr. Speaker, we talk about equity, but there are so many students, so many. You didn't hear the protests? You didn't hear about it? You will say that. You will say that. There are so many, Mr. Speaker, there are so many children who went to school on mainland St. Vincent into some of the best secondary schools, and they had to drop out because the parents could not afford it. It was like you had to carry two houses, one on the mainland, one on Canouan. Families broken, father one way, mother the other way. They're trying to cope with the situation. Now we have the possibility where students can now, where secondary education can be offered from 1 to 3 as of September this year, 2020. Because there are some of the students who are informed who said if they had space, the parents said if they had space, the children would have been in Canouan a long time ago, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank all those who were involved in helping to make sure that that a possible solution was given. It was a momentous occasion, Mr. Speaker, on that day. The people came out. The people, they came and applauded and supported what was done. They have the kids at home next to them. They're able to give proper guidance, and in order to help them in whatever way possible so they can succeed. Mr. Speaker, the Mary Hutchinson Primary School, we have brought this problem to the House before. The Mary Hutchinson's Primary School, where it is housed right now, Mr. Speaker, and the Canouan Government School, you could call them twins. Same building, built around the same time, all of that. The problems that were affecting the Canouan Government School, where the parents had to protest and say they are not sending their children to school. The minute they were outside on the tree conducting classes, the ministry had to go to the island. The ministry engineer said one thing, that the school is safe. Another engineer from a reputable company on the island said no, it wasn't safe, and everything was, the parents decided to take the side of the engineer on the island. You know what happened? They had to walk and that school, find alternative location. The walls were leaning one way, the foundation cracking up, and all this, that was happening at the school, Mr. Speaker. And it's the similar condition that is happening at the school where the Mary Hutchinson Primary School, the building where it is housed right now, it's the same thing that's happening. And we had bought that here before, but here what must happen, Mr. Speaker? It again took the parents and the PTA to protest and say what they were going to do if the problem is not addressed for them to get action. And it's not only that school, you know, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about equity. Last year, there were so many problems of different schools all on the internet. When you look at the ceiling of some of the schools, when it rains, electrical cords running through the roof and it raining. I heard one teacher had said in a conversation that anytime she see the cloud set up, she's walking to school with an umbrella in her classroom to hold it up. And it's a serious case, Mr. Speaker. We had lots of problems. But then we say we spent 70 million. Why do we have to wait until it reaches to that point? What mechanism have we put in place to make sure that you have regular maintenance of our educational institution? What have we put in place so that at the end of whether 5 or 10 or 11 years, you don't have to find 7 million. You take care of the problems. And how can we expect teachers and students to perform? How can we expect them to perform, Mr. Speaker, in conditions like these? We must do better than what we are doing. Presently, the students of the Mary Hutchinson Primary School and their parents are complaining. The building is hot. The ministry had to provide funds in order to try to help them. It is cramped, and Mr. Speaker, I know it is in the budget. We have, is it $300,000 to look at the first phase of design and demolition and all of that. But we need to work on this problem, give it our urgent priority to make it work. Mr. Speaker, secondly, we need to create a cadre of competent, highly qualified, highly motivated teachers. I remember looking at, I think it was one of these online newspapers, and they were talking about how the teachers in our system, they are not motivated because of the condition in which they work and things like that. But we need to improve that. But Mr. Speaker, we need to create a cadre of competent and highly qualified teachers who are motivated to work. I know we have been offering training. I heard they talk about it is this government. When they came into office in 2001, you only had 4 teachers with first degree at the primary level. But it is us on this side of the house who brought the idea during a budget debate like this, that teachers can get the degree right here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and it was stated how we can achieve it. That came from this side of the house. And if you check the Hansard, you will see that I am correct. And it was made right here, Mr. Speaker. And you know what happened? We also had to return to this house, Mr. Speaker, and we had to argue. We had to also argue and bring forth the point for the appointment of these teachers at the primary level, because it was said they don't appoint teachers with degree at primary schools. And we had to argue and bring forward that point so that teachers who have degrees can be appointed at primary schools in this country. We did that. Mr. Speaker, it is also time to separate the teaching profession from the service commission. The teachers must be given their own commission to deal with the professionalism and the development of teachers in this country. We need to do that. We're talking about a revolution. and we want things to change. But in some cases, we're operating in the same mode. We have to change the mode in which we operate, re-engineer our system to bring the benefits, not only to students, but also to teachers. Yes. Mr. Speaker, the third point is, we need to undertake a major reform in our curriculum and in pedagogy. We also, in doing so, Mr. Speaker, we have to take into account the use of the technology in order to make sure that our students have the best and possible ways, Mr. Speaker, to learn. We need to make learning exciting. We need to make it attractive. I asked a question in this Honourable House concerning the one laptop per child initiative. And I have the answer here from the Honourable Minister of Education. And I'm going to quote parts of it, what he said, Mr. Speaker. He said, a study was conducted, and from the start of the initiative, teachers seem to be trained in the general use of the technology, primarily the computer, rather than pedagogical training. That is, how to use the technology, how to use the computer in order to get over how to use the technology in teaching then. Mr. Speaker, and it went on to say, the Ministry of Education recognizing that consolidating and learning from the perceptual and actual failings of phase 1 and 2 of the one laptop per child initiative is critical to the successful implementation of phase 3 of this program. The failings of level at phase 1 and 2, and the hope to learn from that in order to implement phase 3. They have to said when they look at all they combine the information what they have, then they will put together get to phase 3, Mr. Speaker. Well, I haven't seen anything about phase 3 in this budget, so I came to the conclusion that the findings is being assessed. But I can go on further, Mr. Speaker, and state, but since we are doing that, and we're talking about technology to improve teaching and learning, Mr. Speaker, have we reformed or made changes to the curriculum at the Teachers Training College? Have we done that? Have we made it mandatory that all teachers at the Teachers College will be trained in the use of technology in delivery of the curriculum in order to make the teaching and learning process better? Have we done that, Mr. Speaker? We have to do that. The other point, Mr. Speaker, training teachers, bringing somebody from Union Island or from whatever school or Canouan, and you give them a couple hours training in the use of technology, in the use of the delivery of the curriculum. Mr. Speaker, that alone is not going to get teachers to do what they have to do. I suggest that we have a cadre of professionals who are versed in this area. You zone the country and you have these professionals visit schools, working with teachers in order to implement what we want the teachers to do in our schools. Because to some teachers, yes, they are trained in the use of the computer, but not how to apply it in the teaching and learning process. And we need to get that right, Mr. Speaker. I heard the Minister, Mr. Speaker, talking about CVQs, and that a number of our young people, they are given opportunities in order to be certified. But St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Speaker, have gained acceptance in order to offer CVQs in and out of post-secondary institutions. Let's look at what is happening in our schools, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the dropout rate. have we assessed and reevaluate our curriculum in order to take into account all the students of varied ability? Why are these children dropping out of schools? Mr. Speaker, the CARICOM has mandated that CVQs level 1 and 2 can be earned at schools, but you have to get the necessary criterias and such available in order for the schools to be accepted. But Mr. Speaker, if we made it, give our young people in the various secondary schools the opportunity to earn CVQs, and also everybody wouldn't be able to get 10, 11, 12 subjects, but they can leave school with, say, 4 subjects, 2 CVQ skills, or 1 which they can manage, because it is also linked to on-the-job training. So when these children leave school, they won't have to drop out. When they leave school, they can gain employment. Even some of the same places where you had the on-the-job training might be willing to take some of them, to employ some of them because of how they perform. We must give our young people the fighting chance, give them the opportunity to succeed. And we're talking about equity. So many students wouldn't have to drop out if we give them the opportunity to succeed. Mr. Speaker, climate change, moving quickly. I would agree with the Minister of Finance that climate change is very important. It is real. And on page 16 of his budget, he states, lowering the fallout from these events will require adaptation strategy that invest in disaster readiness and climate-smart infrastructures, incorporate appropriate technologies and zoning regulation, and deploy well-targeted social safety net to help reduce vulnerability and improve countries' abilities to respond. Mr. Speaker, if our country have to respond appropriately, then it is time to introduce climate change education within our schools. We must start with our young people, Mr. Speaker. They must learn knowledge is power, and we must give them the opportunity to know what is facing them. They themselves may be able to come up with solutions to mitigate against the effects of climate change. Not only that, they can spread the word. So throughout our education system, be it primary, secondary, the higher level, we need to implement climate change education in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I'll go further. Mr. Speaker, when I look at climate change, Mr. Speaker, I would always remember the plight of the people of Big Sand Union Island. We see it, we feel it, it is real. I have seen people spending what they said to me, their life savings, in order to try to save their property, to try to save land, to try to save house, and try to save whatever they have worked for and invested in, Mr. Speaker. Now I'm seeing the same situation at Myro. Because we must realize, I have to talk about it, because, Mr. Speaker, every time I go to Myro, I will talk about it until the problem is solved. Every time I go to Myro, I'm bombarded by questions. There's some people in Union Island who have built their livelihood in it, and quite a number of young people have invested in small businesses that operate at Myro. The boat boys who build the boats and buy the engine, the t-shirt vendors, the restaurant operators, the fisher folk, the laundromat that operate there, the craftsmen and women, even the Tobago Keys have anchorage there. The Tobago Keys is a major hub in the Southern Grenadines. It is part of our patrimony. When we talk about beauty, It's the best anchorage site in the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker. And there is no doubt that if we let Southwest Bay to be eroded, that we're gonna regret it later. We are going to regret it, Mr. Speaker. And this is an urgent matter which must be dealt with urgently. The minister also alluded to, on page, I think it's 15 of his budget presentation, when he spoke about Budget 2020 reflects the seriousness and urgency of the government commitment to building resilience, protecting our infrastructure, and safeguarding the Vincentian people. Mr. Speaker, I look at the point, safeguarding the Vincentian people. Page 15, the first paragraph. Mr. Speaker, we need to consider Ms. Dolly Snag and her husband in Canawan whenever it rains, especially if it rains heavily, because the drain and the road at the back of her house is not fixed, she's flooded continually. Water flows from the back straight through the front of the house. Mr. Speaker, we need to consider that. If we are talking about safeguarding the Vincentian people, she must be safeguarded. It is important. The Minister of Works, Transport and Works, talk about we must list all the roads. Mr. Speaker, I've listed roads since I'm in this house, and I don't think any of the roads which I've listed since I'm here have been fixed. It is...
But he said he has the money now, though.
Well, he has the money. I know that. So, Mr. Speaker, I will write my list, and I will give the list of all the roads in the Grenadines that I have been complaining about, and I hope that some of them will be addressed, especially the most critical ones, be addressed in order to bring relief to the people of these islands. Mr. Speaker, I wish to bring to the attention of this House, in Union Island, we have a gem, beautiful gem, Mr. Speaker. It is called the Union Island gecko. It's a tiny, breathtaking lizard, Mr. Speaker, with jewels on it. It is said to be, the weight of it is said to be about that of a pinch of salt. It is, yes, it is 3 centimeters long. Mr. Speaker, it is 3 centimeters long, and I have a picture of it. You have to enlarge so that people can see it. This is found, Mr. Speaker, in a forest reserve in Union Island above Chatham. But what is important about that, Mr. Speaker, reading from a magazine, it is of global ecology and conservation. It says, illegal trade in this species was first reported in 2011, and overcropping for the international pet trade is now considered the single most important threat to the continued survival of this species. Mr. Speaker, I know the Forestry Division, in conjunction with the Ministry of Agriculture, went to Union Island in order to try to promote and sensitize people about this very important species. And you know what is important about it, Mr. Speaker? It is only found in Union Island. It can be found no other place in the world, only in Union Island. I am calling on various people in Union Island and throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You have to realize the gem that you have. I don't know, there's a rule about calling names, but Mr. Speaker, in 2005, this lizard was discovered by Father Mark De Silva and Matthew Harvey. who in that area, I guess we had ecotourism in that area, and they discovered it. People are going in there. It's so small, it lives under rocks and logs and things because it must keep moist. And people are going there, poaching the lizard and selling it abroad. And it must stop. We have to put the laws in place in order to protect our gem. You can't have a gem and be selling it. Okay? The necessary laws must be put in place. The means in order to protect.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank
Well, it was the honourable member that gave way.
the honourable member for giving way. Yes, I want to thank the honourable member first of all for raising the issue, but I just want to extend on and update the honourable House as to what exactly pertains now. Mr. Speaker, the highest level of protection of the Union Island gecko, endemic to St. Vincent and the Grenadines under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, that is CITES, has been authorized. In fact, it was actually done about 2 months ago, placing the species in Appendix 1 of CITES, which is the highest protection. I must underscore that this was not publicized to the best that could be done, because as it pertains to turtles, we had a big campaign on that, publicizing the protection, the issue of the parrotfish and the shark finning. But the issue which was raised by the honourable member, I just want to assure him that it is now totally protected under CITES, and that a national campaign will ensue so that the general public will have the information. In fact, it was done in Geneva, Switzerland, about 2 months ago, and a campaign will take place. It took place just before Christmas. We went into Christmas. Now we have the budget, so the information will be disseminated. I'm obliged, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Honourable Minister of Agriculture because I was coming to that part, but I don't have to do it anymore because he already gave the information.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, you know, I made a presentation during the debate on the estimates, and it concerned the Canawan Wharf. And after the presentation of the budget by the Honourable Minister of Finance, I got calls from Canawan. And so, Louis, I want to tell you, the people from Canawan not singing, things are getting better in regards to the wharf. Mr. Speaker, the calls I got, I wonder if I could use some of the terms in this house.
Why not?
Some people say, Oli, mother walk by, we ain't getting the wharf. Some people say, Kopai, that is a term that is used in Canawan and Pity Matnik, Kopai. So what we gonna do? Mr. Speaker, because people, when they look at the wharf, Mr. Speaker, the temporary wharf, dinghy cannot go alongside because of the way it is built. Stones at the side. I know this Honourable House already have a picture from the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Stones at the side and all of that. The same wharf which was condemned and told not to be used, that is a wharf, even visitors come ashore in the dinghy to go and buy their supplies and everything. They had to be climbing up and all kind of concrete that has been exposed to the elements, the weather, they broken off and all of that. And somebody so kindly went and put one of those step ladder so they can now use that. But Mr. Speaker, it is a serious thing. I heard Sir Louis talking this morning about some people on the dirt road and the mud. Mr. Speaker, sometimes when you go on the wharf to collect your goods, your foot, the ladies have to go in the sea, wash your foot before they go home. When it is dusty, it's the same thing as if you're wearing stockings. Something must be done. I know it will be said that it is going to be done by the developers. But Mr. Speaker, if this is such an important aspect of our development and you are getting assistance to build it, why is it not in the budget? It should be there. It should be here. The people want to know that the problems that affect them, that it is being handled by this government. I heard the minister, I think it's on page 52.
I remember you have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, thank you very much, sir. On page 52, I think it's page 52. Is it page 52? When he was talking about the importance of the Grenadines and how much he said, oh, it's page 52, yes, he said, the Grenadines are unique collectively and individually. The islands of the Grenadines have played an outsized role in attracting foreign direct investment, creating employment and general wealth. The true extent of the Grenadines' contribution to our economy is simultaneously underreported and underutilized. He went on to say that the government cherishes the unique character and contribution of the Grenadines. Well, if you do so, and you realize that we are facing a grave problem, Mr. Speaker, when you go to this wharf, this temporary wharf, amidst it all, sometimes people have to look for a way to walk, especially if it rains, because you have gas containers, those big trucks, diesel containers, you have people trying to get their stuff. Mr. Speaker, it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed urgently. And whatever the solution is, let's sit down with the people, work it out, so that at the end of the day, they too will be able to say, things are getting better. But it is since I came to this house, since 2004, where you can understand that, it is since 2004 we have been addressing this problem. And up to now, we had different, year after year. And the longer you wait, is the worse it gets, and the more money you have to spend. Who said a stitching time save 9? You said that, doctor?
I showed how the cost
It is over 15 years we have been trying to get the wharf to be fixed. And on an island that has such development, Mr. Speaker, where you have to import all these different materials, people up and down. We now have boats to the Grenadines, we never have it before. But private investors, they have invested in boats. We have boats every day of the week. Every time you have a ground sea, high waves, the temporary, almost all the time, the temporary wharf is damaged. Depends on the ferocity of the waves. Just a couple of weeks ago, they had to go on trucks on the wharf, walking divers, trying to assess what damage have been done. You're throwing more dirt on top it and press it with rollers in order to try to make it form. We must do better than that as a developing island that is contributing so much to the economy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We must get this right, Mr. Speaker. We have to get this right. It is important that we do that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we also have the Fort Murray in Union Island. What a beautiful sight. Even the Minister of Tourism, in answer to a question spoke about the view. It is panoramic, Mr. Speaker. You can, on a clear day, you'll see mainland St. Vincent, you see Beckway, you see Myro, you see the Tobago Keys, you see Palm Island, you see Carriacou, and if you're good enough, Mr. Speaker, you'll also see Grenada. It is overlooking the airport. We have a great opportunity here. Mr. Speaker, in that area, we can build toilet facilities. You build a performing area so you can have cultural presentations. You build booths with vendors. We're talking about tourism development. Vendors, the crafts, the T-shirts, all of that can be sold. You have a little bar area where you provide some of our indigenous foods and all of that, Mr. Speaker. We can do that. What do you mean all of that can go up there? You have the land and the space, and we can do it. The land and the space is there, Mr. Speaker. I thought you were a government who say you can't. The words such as can't don't come in your vocabulary. Now you're telling me you can't? You can do it if you put your mind to it and you set about in order to build infrastructure which will contribute. I heard well, if I didn't go up there, I would not have known that it was in that state. Okay?
Honourable member, he's coming to an end. Please allow him.
If you were in that state. And Mr. Speaker, based on what the Minister of Finance said, I agree with you. Because if that was fixed on page 12, he spoke about the creation of a 5-person maintenance crew whose specific mandate is to upkeep and repair tourism sites. And this can be done in that area. You have it here. All I'm asking is that you do it so that you can create better opportunities for people so that they will be able to take care, to earn a livelihood and take care of themselves. And they too would also protect it, Mr. Speaker, because they realize that it is bringing something to them and they too would also protect it. I need to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak to the people of the Southern Grenadines. I wish I had more time, Mr. Speaker, to address some of their concerns, apart from roads and some of our tourism sites and the wharf in Canawan. We also have the rehabilitation of the airports, the airport project, Mr. Speaker. When you look at the Union Island Airport, which I had been bringing to this house from time to time, I remember I was buffed one time and I really felt the buff because it was said that, imagine you couldn't call us and make a call about that, even toilet facilities you're making noise about, but I lived to see the day when cleaners had to line up a whole set of buckets outside as a display. And when people go in and use the washroom, then they go in and clean. And we should never come to that at a port of entry in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And they cannot doubt me because they know it is true. The next day, when I spoke about it in Parliament, they got a phone call in Union Island, move the buckets from where you have them located. We should never come to that. That building, we had electrical problems, roof problems, and we have been complaining all the time, Mr. Speaker. And it's time we learn to take care of the resources that are given to us in order to create a better St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you very much.